Imagine a prophecy so mysterious, so ancient, that for nearly 2,000 years it has remained impossible to fulfill. A prophecy hidden deep within the pages of the Bible, a ritual involving a perfect red cow, not just any animal, a rare, flawless red heifer with no defect, no blemish, and never placed under a yoke. For centuries, the Jewish people have searched for one, because according to Scripture, without the red heifer, the temple cannot be purified. And without the purification of the temple, the third temple cannot begin its service. But something shocking happened recently. Red heifers were brought to Israel, and many prophecy watchers believe the moment described thousands of years ago may finally be approaching. Could this ancient ritual unlock one of the most mysterious prophetic timelines in the Bible? And could it be connected to the events described in the book of Revelation? Tonight we are going deep into one of the most fascinating and controversial prophecies in the Bible. The red heifer, the sign many believe must appear before the third temple. To understand why the red heifer matters so much, we must go back thousands of years into the laws given to Israel. The instructions were very specific. So specific, in fact, that throughout history only 9 red heifers are believed to have ever been used for this sacred ritual. And according to ancient Jewish tradition, the 10th red heifer will appear in the time of the Messiah. But before we explore the modern developments surrounding this prophecy, we must first understand what the Bible actually says, because the story begins in the wilderness, during the time when God gave Moses the laws that would guide the people of Israel. These instructions are recorded in the book of Numbers. In Numbers chapter 19, God gave a command that puzzled generations. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and said, "Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring thee a red heifer without spot, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came yoke." Numbers chapter 19, verse 2. The animal had to meet very strict requirements. It had to be completely red. Even 2 hairs of another color could disqualify it. It could have no physical defect. And it must have never carried a burden or been used for work. This made finding a suitable red heifer extremely rare. But the ritual that followed was even more unusual. The heifer was taken outside the camp. It was slaughtered, then burned completely. The priest would mix the ashes with water. These ashes would then be used for something very important: purification. According to the law given in Numbers, anyone who came into contact with death became ceremonially unclean. For example, if someone touched a dead body, entered a place where someone had died, or even touched a grave, they would become ritually impure, and without purification, they could not enter the temple. The ashes of the red heifer were used in a special purification water. This water would be sprinkled on anyone who had become ceremonially unclean. Only after this process could they participate in worship. Without the ashes of the red heifer, the purification ritual could not take place. And without purification, temple worship could not function. This is why the red heifer was so important. It was the key to restoring temple service. Throughout the history of Israel, the temple has always been central to worship. The first temple was built by Solomon. It stood in Jerusalem as the dwelling place of God's presence. But that temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. Later, a second temple was built and expanded during the time of Herod the Great. This was the temple that stood during the time of Jesus Christ. But in the year 70 AD, Roman armies destroyed it. Since then, there has been no temple in Jerusalem. Yet many prophecies suggest that a third temple will exist in the future. A temple that could play a role in the final prophetic events described in Book of Revelation. But before that temple could ever begin functioning, there would be one critical requirement: the purification ritual. And that ritual requires the ashes of a red heifer, which raises a powerful question. Could the appearance of a red heifer be a signal that preparations for the third temple are moving forward? Jewish tradition preserves a fascinating historical record. According to ancient rabbinic writings, only 9 red heifers have ever been used for the purification ritual since the time of Moses. This record appears in the Mishnah, particularly in the tractate called Para. According to these writings, the first red heifer was prepared by Moses in the wilderness. Several others were prepared during the time of the first temple. More were prepared during the era of the second temple. Altogether, Jewish tradition records 9 red heifers used throughout history. 9, not 10. And this is where the prophecy becomes even more intriguing, because Jewish teachers preserved a belief about the 10th red heifer. Ancient Jewish writings say something remarkable. They say the 10th red heifer will be prepared in the days of the Messiah. This statement is often attributed to the medieval Jewish scholar Maimonides. He wrote that 9 red heifers have been prepared from the time of Moses until the destruction of the second temple, and the 10th will be prepared by the King Messiah. For many believers in biblical prophecy, this statement raises an important question. If a red heifer appears today, could it mean the world is approaching a moment long anticipated in prophecy? Could it mean that preparations are underway for something that has not happened in nearly 2,000 years? The rebuilding of the temple. To understand why this matters, we must look at the location where the temple once stood. The temple was built on a sacred site in Jerusalem, known today as the Temple Mount. For Jews, this is the holiest place on earth. It is believed to be the place where Abraham prepared to offer Isaac. Solomon built the first temple. The second temple stood for centuries. But today, the Temple Mount is also home to 2 Islamic holy sites, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Because of this, the idea of rebuilding a Jewish temple there is extremely controversial and politically sensitive. Yet despite these challenges, some religious groups in Israel are actively preparing for the possibility that the temple could one day be rebuilt. And among the most well-known of these groups is an organization dedicated entirely to this goal. In Jerusalem, there is a group that has spent decades preparing for the restoration of temple worship. This organization is called the Temple Institute. Their mission is extraordinary. They are recreating the sacred objects that would be used in a future temple. These include priestly garments, sacred musical instruments, temple altars, golden vessels described in the Bible. They have even trained individuals believed to be descendants of the priestly tribe of Aaron. But there is one item they cannot manufacture, one requirement they cannot simply build: the ashes of the red heifer. Without it, the purification ritual described in the Book of Numbers cannot take place. And without purification, temple worship cannot begin. For years, this remained an unsolved problem, until something unusual happened in recent times. Finding a red heifer that meets the biblical requirements is incredibly difficult. The animal must be completely red, free from blemish, never used for labor, and perfectly healthy. Even a small number of non-red hairs can disqualify it. Because of this, many attempts throughout history have failed. Farmers and breeders have tried for decades to produce such an animal, but most candidates eventually develop imperfections. Yet in recent years, something unexpected happened. Several red heifers appeared that seemed to meet the biblical description, and this development sparked intense interest among prophecy watchers. In 2022, 5 red heifers were transported to Israel. They came from ranches in the United States and were carefully selected for their potential to meet the strict biblical requirements. Their arrival generated enormous attention among religious communities and prophecy researchers. Many saw it as a possible step toward fulfilling the ancient purification ritual. For the first time in generations, there appeared to be real candidates for the red heifer described in Scripture. However, these animals must still be examined carefully over time. If they develop blemishes or lose their red coloring, they can be disqualified. But if even one remains qualified, it could potentially be used for the purification ritual described thousands of years ago, and that possibility has caused many people to revisit biblical prophecies about the future temple. Because if the purification ritual becomes possible again, it could remove one of the biggest obstacles to restoring temple worship. But if even one of these red heifers remains perfect according to the law in the book of Numbers, the ancient purification ritual could happen again. And if that happens, one of the final obstacles to restoring temple worship may disappear. But what would it mean for the future? Because the Bible connects a future temple to the events described in the book of Revelation. And that is exactly what we are about to explore next.